This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Wednesday. It's September 6th, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. First story I want to cover today has to do with the Ukraine, and let me just pull it up here for myself to get it in front of me. But the whole issue of this Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, is costing more in one day for the Biden administration than the Biden administration sending to Maui. Now, why is this disturbing? Because, first of all, the whole issue of Ukraine is a war that should never have been fought. It's a war that was caused by they're saying the neocons. They wanted to blame it on the right. The truth is it's been the left and the State Department that has pushed this issue of expanding NATO to the borders of Russia, which is an aggressive move and certain to cause Russia to fight back and try to block that, because Russia as a nation state wants a buffer. They want to have a sphere of influence, just like the United States, the Cuban Missile Crisis, objected to the Soviet Union putting nuclear weapons in Cuba because that was our sphere of influence, the Western Hemisphere. Well, that's traditional geopolitics, and it's fundamental to understanding how nation states operate. But the point is that the left, which was in love with Russia since 1917 when it was communist, decided they hated Russia after the fall of the Berlin Wall because Russia renounced communism. And we've got the Democratic Party that is now neo-Marxist. There's no doubt about it. And it's frightening how extreme they are. Now, this situation in Maui is also a tragedy, and it's not getting the appropriate coverage that it needs. The area that burned in Maui was this beautiful area along the water, and it was occupied by natives. These were people who had been there a long time. These were not the super wealthy. The homes of the super wealthy didn't burn. The houses of this narrow strip on the ocean burned. And from all the reports, it seems like the water was turned off. They weren't being allowed to get out. People died in their cars. They were blocked from escaping this area. People had to go into the ocean in order not to be burned. It seems to me this was a reset of the super wealthy, the oligarchs, the World Economic Forum group, just saying, we're going to take this land. If these people won't sell it to us, we're just going to burn them out, kill them. Now, again, I've maintained that this transhumanism, this World Economic Forum, is vicious, and they have no regard for people. They're a depopulationist movement. They think there's too many people. And Biden sending more money to Ukraine is insane because it's all being stolen. The corruption is so apparent. The Biden family's corruption is outrageous and in front of the American people, while the middle class of the United States is being destroyed. So billions are being sent to Ukraine. They're not winning the counteroffensive. Russia's in complete control of the military situation. And the money that goes over to Ukraine goes to the arms manufacturers and dealers who are supplying the weaponry. They're making a fortune. And to the corrupt oligarchs who steal the money. Now, this is all these themes tie together. I'm going to show you a couple of things as we go along, because I'm trying to write about this as much as I can and as hard as I can in order to block it. At one point, I thought I would retire, but I'm now back as active as I've ever been. I can't be retired when the situation in the world is this critical. I just can't live with myself not to try to do whatever we can to expose this vicious evil that we have at the heart of those trying to wreck the United States of America and those trying to bring this country down. Okay, so the fundamental issue here is that the United States is providing the lion's share of the funds to Ukraine to sustain its war against Russia, which began in February 2022. The United States has committed $113 billion to Ukraine, which breaks down into $223 million per day. It's according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The United States military aid to Ukraine alone has averaged $86 million per day. This is outrageous. It's huge amounts of money, and it's backing up NATO. Donald Trump said, what do we need NATO for? Cold War is over. It's a Cold War organization. So the Ukraine's outgoing defense minister, who was fired by Zelenskyy for corruption, said his country is spending nearly $100 million a day on its war against Russia. That's a sum that exceeds the more than $95 million Biden wants to send to Maui after the island suffered the most fatal fire in the nation's history in over a century. A fire that did not have to happen. I'm going to cover that in a second. But the point is that this was a vicious government supporting oligarchs like Biden and his family who get away with massive corruption, stealing of money in the billions of dollars. The whole new World Economic Forum, this new world order, has at its heart the idea that a few of these privileged people who are transhuman, they become superhuman. They have computer chips in their heads. They're going to become combined hybrids with computer human, so that they'll never die. They can just transmit their intelligence into a machine when their bodies wear out, with their bodies being renewed through all kinds of medical advances, cybernetics, biomedics, all the rest of this stuff that they could prolong, make themselves into artificial bodies and have perpetual life extension. This is insanity, and it is at heart anti-God, anti the idea that we are here for a limited period of time, anti that this is a spiritual experience that we're here for. This is the entire embrace of what Satan told Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Just partake of this fruit and you will know what God knows, and you can do. God doesn't want you to know these secrets. That's the only reason God is he won't tell you the truth. Satan says, I'll tell you the truth. Prince of Lies. Let's cover the next story because it's related. Ukraine is now finally at another round of trying to get rid of these oligarchs. So one of the top oligarchs, a guy named Kolomoisky, Ihor Kolomoisky, is among Ukraine's 5 richest citizens, and he was arrested by Ukrainian authorities on an array of fraud and money laundering charges. Now, Kolomoisky happens to be very tied to Hunter Biden, and he was the guy who put Zelenskyy into the presidency because Zelenskyy was a comic whose show was on Kolomoisky's television channel before Kolomoisky decided to make Zelenskyy president. Now, Zelenskyy sacked his own defense minister just recently, an announcement that came the same weekend as Kolomoisky's arrest. And this week, the parliament is going to be asked to make a personal decision, which is essentially to have a sweeping getting rid of this corruption, which from time to time Ukraine does in a show trying to clean things up, which they never do. It's the most corrupt country, I think, in the world. Kolomoisky had strong ties and has had strong ties to Biden. I mean, he was a prime mover in one of the major banks that was involved in money laundering schemes. He had ties into Burisma, which was the natural gas company that was paying Hunter Biden to be on the board. There's millions and millions of dollars were moved in money laundering schemes. And now that Kolomoisky's been arrested, is kind of the pressure the Bidens are putting on to make it look like something is happening to clean up the corruption. Of course, they're not going to clean up the corruption until Biden arrests himself and his son, which at the heart of the White House, and the Department of Justice is doing nothing except going after Donald Trump because Donald Trump dared to question whether the 2020 election was legitimate. And of course, the Democrats have been questioning that forever. The Democrats, when they lose an election like 2000 with Al Gore and the Florida recount against George W. Bush, or when they were trying in 2016, the Democrats had this lawfare scheme to get Hamilton electors to go to the Electoral College and vote against Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump had won the state's vote for president. And that's not insurrection. That's not subversion. That's just legitimate questioning of an election. As long as the Democrats do it, it's okay. We've got a one-way justice here. This is totalitarianism. I think the American people are beginning to see it and recognize it for what it is. This is neo-Marxism. These people don't want to be criticized. And that's, I think, the fundamental issue that we're going to have to cope with in trying to clean up America is how do we get rid of Congress, which is, McCarthy and this whole idea of the not being willing to impeach Biden for obvious corruption. It's Mitch McConnell, who's also suffering senior moments and shouldn't be there. His wife, Elaine Chao, worth probably $300 million or more in China. Well, the only reason that family's alive is because Elaine Chao continues to agree that Mitch McConnell will do what the Chinese government wants. Okay, I want to cover a number of stories today, so let's move on to this next one about China's influence in the oil markets is growing with the BRICS expansion. Now, China just made an offer to Iran, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia to join the BRICS. Now, these are three of the major oil producers in the world. So BRICS group now is going to control about 41% of all global oil production, according to the International Energy Agency. And China is trying to expand to be an alternative to the G7. The G7 essentially, following Russia's permanent withdrawal, basically the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is becoming a much bigger deal altogether. And China is committed to de-dollarization, to making sure the dollar long-term is not going to be the world's reserve currency. We're going through a major shift, a major paradigm shift in international politics, in which the United States is self-destructing. Policies that we are implementing are designed to weaken America because we have in charge a group of neo-Marxists who are determined to take measures which will depopulate, which will punish the American people. The Federal Reserve, with the United States printing money like we are, we're $33 trillion in debt. We have to print money that's backed by nothing in order to pay off the interest on the debt. When you do that, your money becomes worthless. Modern monetary theory, since it's fiat currency, you can print whichever you want and then just print more money to pay off the interest, and nobody cares. Because as long as your currency holds its value. The problem is the currency is becoming worthless. Go to the grocery store and see what $100 buys compared to what it bought a few years ago. Since 1971, when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard, the dollar has depreciated in value almost 100%. And that's why it is so imperative. Take a look at this book offer on the Truth Central website. I'm showing you, I've written this book, and again, it's outlining exactly what's happening. You're seeing the entire nature of the, this was the book here, Coming Crash. It's not a hard read, but it's going to show you exactly. I talk about the BRICS nations. I talk about Russia and its opposition to West Europe. Europe is the first to go. Europe's already in a recession. We'll be following it shortly. You can get the book free And the 800 number, by the way, does connect to Swiss America. Yesterday there was a problem. The number was not correct. Today the number is correct. You get a free copy of the book. And please talk to Swiss America about your IRAs, your 401ks. Get some of it in gold, because gold in the coming crisis is going to possibly double in value. Whereas I'm saying we're going into September, we're in September and October. These are the months in which the stock market has traditionally crashed, and it could do so again. And that's something you just can't really afford to be ignoring. It's essentially, if you have money in mutual funds, those mutual funds could lose money in your IRA and your 401k, and it could take a long time for that to come back. This is going to be a massive crash. Please call Swiss America. Please talk to them. It's extremely important. Okay, let's go on to a couple of climate change stories that I want to follow today, because again, this all ties together. At least in my mind, it does. First of all, I want to do a story about France losing power in Africa. I'm going to cover that one first. You're seeing a whole number of states, adding 2 new African member states to the BRICS nations is a major change here now. That the whole idea of this BRICS 11 and the Shanghai Cooperation Union and the Eurasia Economic Union, if these groups get together, you've got one of the major blocks coming together that is anti-American, anti-colonial. And you've got one country after another throwing the French out: Chad, Guinea, Mali, Niger, Gabon. I mean, they're throwing France out. They've had enough with France. This is really another round of ending the colonialism in Africa. Military officers decided to take power in Gabon. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. After hyper pro-France President Ali Bongo won a dodgy election that lacked credibility. All the institutions were dissolved. Borders with Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, the Republic of Congo were closed. All security deals with France were annulled. And France has got a military base there. Nobody knows what's going to happen. This is a purging of France from Africa. And the African nations are essentially going to descend into a round of tribal violence, into economic chaos. And the rest of the world is not going to care, because with this oligarchical attitude that only certain people are going to survive economically, the World Economic Forum looks at Africa as a great place to go get the natural resources, but they don't want the people. Fundamentally, we're dealing with a depopulation movement, and that's at the core of the climate change movement. It's at the core of what happened in Maui. Now, there's another, I think, extremely important story that was breaking today, and that there's a climate scientist out there who is not necessarily a very prominent climate scientist, but he's written, his name is Patrick Brown, and he's written an editorial. And what he's saying is that there's a glut of PhDs, universities which had all this student loan money. Student debt is huge, over trillions, I think over $1 trillion. So this climate scientist, Patrick Brown, he published an article in the Free Press in which he was saying, which is thefp.com, and said essentially that he was publishing a bogus paper in a peer-reviewed journal, published in Nature, a very respected journal. And he was saying that climate change is causing the wildfires, like in Maui. Climate change, he's quoting the Associated Press, climate change keeps making wildfires and smoke worse. Scientists call it the new abnormal. PBS NewsHour, wildfires driven by climate change are on the rise. Spain must do more to prepare, experts say. The New York Times, how climate change turned lush Hawaii into a tinderbox. Bloomberg, Maui fires show climate change ugly reach. And he says, I'm a climate scientist. And he thinks, he does think there's climate change, but he's saying what he does is he eliminates other factors in his research. And the startling thing is he's reporting is that 80% of these wildfires are started by human beings. 80%. And I think if he was being truthfully honest, he would admit that a number of the climate hysterics are actually causing wildfires to make it look like climate change is producing these catastrophes. And it's easy. I mean, with the amount of land that has to be inspected or policed in order for people not to start fires is enormous. And if they're clever about it, the arson is a way to call attention to climate change. Now, his article is that the science is illegitimate because in order to get published with this glut, the student loans, as I was saying, expanded universities. Universities were able, they had all this money coming in from the federal government for tuition support. The students didn't have to pay. It was great while they were going to school. Now, of course, they're burdened with paying off the debt and they want it forgiven. That's an issue that, again, is before the Supreme Court. And again, I think the Biden administration would like to forgive the loan desperately in order to get the votes. And why they're worried about votes when they're, again, continue to look like they're going to set up for another lockdown, another pandemic, another issue of having to have mail-in ballots. These are intrinsically fraudulent voting measures that everybody knows are intrinsically fraudulent, which they intentionally want to get in so they can cheat and win elections. I mean, it's obvious, yet we're not allowed to say it. It's not like the story we covered yesterday, which I think is so important. This case that was won in the Fifth Circuit, in circuit courts, it's the federal court right below the Supreme Court, which said that the FDA did not have the authority to block off-label prescription of ivermectin in case of COVID. Doctors had the right to prescribe it, and what they were doing is killing people by saying that, no, it's okay, you can't prescribe ivermectin. They want to push people into their pharmaceuticals. Well, this guy, he said that there are 6 times more PhDs earned in the United States each year than there were in the early 1960s. So it's become more difficult than ever than stand out from the crowd. You've got to publish in academics in order to advance on a tenure track. He said, and they know that the scientific journals, the editors are all biased towards climate change. They're all part of this neo-Marxist agenda. And so it's better to say, for instance, the first thing the astute climate researcher knows is that his or her work should support the mainstream narrative, namely that the effects of climate change are both pervasive and catastrophic, and the primary way to deal with them is by employing practical adaptation measures, the stronger, more resilient infrastructure, better zoning and building, etc., not the elimination of carbon dioxide. In the case of wildfires, better forest management or underground power lines, not through policies like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is aimed at reducing greenhouse gases, which any legitimate climate scientists know are not the turning knob of the Earth's temperature. It is a complete lie. Okay, now everything we talked about today comes together. And again, I'm urging you to look at you've got to read. And that's one of the problems, one of the reasons why people are on the internet, they're not reading. I'm writing 3 books. This one's been out for a while. The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. And I show you the climate science. If you just read the book, you'll never again be taken in by the lies of the climate change movement. The second book is coming out. And again, I've done them to look alike. Okay, this one is the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. And it's exposing the woke insanity, an age of disinformation. We're in an age of disinformation. We're in an age in which lying is more pervasive and getting away with it. And the mainstream media does not tell the truth. If there's a pronouncement out of Washington, your first assumption ought to be that it's a lie. And your second question is why is it a lie? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to engineer? And my third book on this will be about the transhumanism, the artificial intelligence, and permanent life extension, which is the real goal. These neo-Marxists, the woke, are just the useful idiots. When the Bill Gateses take over, they'll be the first to go. The revolutionaries always kill the vanguard that got them in because they don't want them protesting anymore. And the ideology is that since we're creating utopia, we're imagining utopia, postmodern, we can imagine the values we want to live on. Imagine a world with no police. John Lennon. Imagine a world with no God, because we fight. God makes us fight with each other. Religion's evil. In the name of religion, people are sexually oppressed. In the name of evil, all these repression of our natural instincts go on. We've got to go back to Rousseau. Man was born free, but is everywhere in chains. Let's eliminate the chains. Then we will be truly free. This is nonsense. But it means that anyone who disagrees with them can't be tolerated. That's Marcuse. I talk about that extensively in this third book. Marcuse in the 60s had repressive toleration. In other words, you're not going to tolerate people whose views are out of sync with this new morality. And the liberation the Frankfurt School recommended was sexual liberation, sex, drugs, rock and roll. This was an agenda that was pushed in order to expand, to break up the capitalist state, to demonize working, demonize education, dumb down the population, and it's in effect happened. The only way we're going to stop this is if people educate themselves, start thinking, and say, we're not going to go along with this. We're not going to have our children taught about sex in kindergarten. The kids don't know what you're talking about. We're not going to have them do gender mutilation operations that affect their lives. These people are evil. They're depopulationists. They hate people. They hate themselves. They want to make themselves superhuman. Nietzsche's Ubermensch, Supermen. This has always been a satanic fallacy that infects people. And today, with the technologies we have, these people believe they can get away with it. They can finally capture us in our metaverse, make us all watch television or watch YouTube or any of the other social media 24 hours a day if we want to, and live in that world. Never emerge from our homes. Order food in, have it delivered to your house, order your groceries in, have everything you want delivered to your house, work from your house. Well, next they'll lock the doors and turn off the internet. Then what are you going to do? These are evil people whose plans they articulate and talk about. And what they're talking about is there's too many people we need to depopulate. I think we've covered a lot today. And Chris, if you have any comments, let's see if the internet will work. What do you think of all the subjects we've covered today?
Obviously, I think that we have to get this news out there for people. I understand that, and I want to thank all the viewers and listeners of this program for helping spread the word and heeding this and making sure you tell your friends what's really going on in the world. As for the depopulationists, this has been going on for a very long time. I've been producing radio for a plethora of years. I used to get letters from a group called the Negative Population Growth Organization. It was an activist group that worked on depopulating the world and making sure that future generations have a negative growth. They used to we used to laugh at this kind of thing, but now it's being taken seriously by those in power. We heard Kamala Harris, she said the quiet part out loud about all of this. The Georgia Guidestones specifically said 500 million people were perfect for the earth when it comes to a disaster and repopulation. What they're really telling you is we have to depopulate. That's why some people with sense. I'm not advocating this kind of thing, but that's why some people with sense may have blown the thing up.
Well, I think we're in a very desperate situation, and just wrapping up, and I constantly say, and I encourage myself to think that in the end, God always wins. God created this place. He created the rules. He can unplug it any day God wants to unplug it. It's not a permanent experience. It's a spiritual experience. And we're not here to make ourselves wealthy at everyone else's expense. We're not here to say, I'm entitled, you are not. We're not here to talk about racism when we are really trying to put the races against each other to divide, to demonize the white race. We're not here to have gender uncertainty where, the transgenders are in charge. Even the lesbians and gays are opposed now to the transgenders because it demeans what they want to have, which is, love between men, love between women. Well, here's transgenders, which is this kind of hermaphrodite mix. These are fundamentally insane ideas. It's schizophrenic. The idea that you can create your personal reality and everybody else has to accept it. That's a psychiatric disease. If you have a core psychiatric disease be the driving principle of a civilization, that civilization is bound to self-destroy. And the neo-Marxists and the cultural Maoists know it. That's why they're doing it. Every time communism is taken over, millions of people die, and generally by starvation. If you follow their agenda, we're going to get rid of farms. We're going to not be able to have nitrogen fertilizer. Billions of people are going to die. Not going to be able to use hydrocarbon fuels, which are natural products of the earth. These people know this agenda is insane. And in the end, God will judge this. And the judgment of God is something that we should all not wish to occur. I'm convinced that we are at 2 Chronicles 7:14. And in concluding, I'm encouraging you, if you like the show, please do like it. I mean, share it, retweet it, get it out there in social media. Let people know I'm back, and support our sponsors. I have every confidence in Swiss America. I've worked with them for 20 years. They're first rate when it comes to honest gold and silver metals investing. My Vital C. I'm 77 years old. My birthday was just a few days ago. And if you take, as Joe Biden, who's about the same age, I recommend My Vital C. These products with, and they're all up there on the website. If you take a look at our sponsors, you'll see them. Each one of these sponsors is there for a reason. Macmillan Agency, if you want to look at annuities or you want to look at financial alternatives, that's My Vital C. It's an extremely important molecule, carbon-60. We've written a book on it. We're launching a telemedicine website, getlongevitymeds.com. It's going to be launched very quickly. We're launching another one. I went back into telemedicine, which is going to be getrxmedsnow.com. I'm forming that this week. We will be in the market with telemedicine very quickly. Support our sponsors. And join me. I'm getting down on my knees and asking God to forgive us all for having let the world get to this point. It certainly seems like end days. It certainly seems like we're going to need a mark of the beast in order to engage in commerce. It looks to me like we need to ask God to forgive us for allowing God to be taken out of our schools, allow God to be taken out of our homes, allow divorce to be as easy as it is, to allow millions of babies to be killed in the womb. We are developing societies which are suicidal and self-destructive. And that's exactly what Satan wants. He wants to harvest all those souls and grab them. And God is here for preserving life and expanding. We're in an interglacial warming period. where carbon dioxide is actually less than it was in the atmosphere 600 million years ago. We've had ice ages. We've had all kinds of cycles of change geologically. Carbon dioxide does not cause them. Carbon dioxide follows warming. It doesn't cause warming. Eliminating carbon dioxide, eventually, if we eliminate enough of it, we won't have any plant growth. We need carbon dioxide to provide life. We exhale carbon dioxide. We've got to ask God to come back into the schools, to come back into our lives. We've got to get back into families and education. The United States of America, we're about to lose with the Department of Justice prosecuting Donald Trump because he dared to call an obvious election where you could see it on television. The Republican observers were thrown out of the polling places. Trucks full of ballots were delivered in the middle of the night. Ballots were being run through these voting machines any number of times. Big blocks of votes for Biden came in all at one time, uniquely. These things need to be investigated. It's not a crime to ask the questions. It's a First Amendment right to do that. But you won't have a First Amendment right, you won't have a Second Amendment right if these people are allowed to remain in control. And I think it's the point where we need God's intervention in order to restore morality to America and to get back to In God We Trust. Jerome Corsi, today is Wednesday, it's September 6th, 2023. Thank you for joining us. TheTruthCentral.com. We are broadcasting every weekday and we'll be back tomorrow. God bless.